On October 13th, the U.S. Navy marked its 250th anniversary, tracing its origins to the first ships of the Continental Navy. Such celebrations are inseparable from honoring the people and battles that shaped not only America, but the world. Among them stands an event that happened 81 years ago, the largest naval battle of World War II, and the last clash of battleships in history. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. Pacific War, 1944. By late 1944, U.S. forces had driven the Imperial Japanese Navy from most of its island bases in the central and southern Pacific. The next objective was to sever Japan's vital supply lines to Southeast Asia. The Japanese Navy was crippled by earlier defeats at the battles of Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Philippine Sea, and was no longer capable of a true strategic victory. However, Japanese High Command felt they had to oppose the Allied landings on the Philippines to deter any future invasion of the Japanese home islands, so they deployed nearly all of their available warships. Japan's plan was to strike from three directions: the southern force through Surigao Strait, the central force with Yamato and Musashi through the Sibuyan Sea, and a northern carrier force aimed to be a decoy and lure the U.S. fleet away from Leyte. The U.S. forces consisted of Admiral William Halsey's carrier-led 3rd Fleet and Vice Admiral Thomas Kincaid's 7th Fleet guarding the landings. Over 60 Japanese warships faced nearly 300 Allied vessels in the largest naval battle in history. The battle consisted of 4 main separate engagements, but the first encounter with Japanese forces happened earlier in Palawan Passage, when U.S. submarines detected the incoming Central Force and launched a successful attack in the early morning of October 23rd. The Japanese Navy lost 3 heavy cruisers. Atago and Maya were sunk, and Takao was heavily crippled. Admiral Kurita himself, who was on board Atago, barely escaped with his life. The Japanese Navy had its first serious losses. When reports from submarines were received, U.S. Air Forces started scouting the area to spot the arrival of the already damaged Japanese Central Force. On the morning of October 24th, a scout plane from Intrepid sighted Kurita's center force with Yamato at its head. 2 hours later, aircraft from Intrepid and Cabot launched the opening strike, beginning the Battle of Sibuyan Sea. In this battle, the Japanese Navy lost another one of their important ships to the airborne attacks. Super Battleship Musashi, a Yamato-class battleship, the heaviest and most heavily armed ever built, was struck again and again by U.S. aircraft. Torpedoes ripped open her flanks, bombs smashed her decks. By nightfall, around 7:30 p.m., the behemoth that embodied Japanese naval power had vanished beneath the waves. Admiral Kurita's forces hastily retreated under fierce U.S. air attacks, passing the sinking Musashi on the way. In the meantime, by night of the 24th of October, the Japanese Southern Force, under command of Admiral Shoji Nishimura, had already been detected by U.S. PT boats patrolling the entrance of Surigao Strait. The PT boats made repeated torpedo attacks, but had no luck in hitting the enemy. However, it forced the Japanese to reveal their approach. Reports were sent, and the 7th Fleet was prepared to meet the enemy. Nishimura's force slipped past the PT boats, but at around 3 o'clock came under heavy torpedo attack from destroyers. Yamashiro was hit, but continued on, while Fuso fell out of formation and sank, as well as 3 Japanese destroyers. The Japanese fleet then had to face 6 U.S. battleships, 5 of which had been damaged in the attack on Pearl Harbor 3 years prior. West Virginia, California, Tennessee, Maryland, and Pennsylvania were repaired, rebuilt, and eager to take their revenge. Shortly after 3 a.m., West Virginia's radar picked up the surviving ships of Nishimura's force at a range of 38 kilometers. At 3:53, she fired 8 of her main battery's 16-inch guns, striking Yamashiro with her first salvo. California and Tennessee joined in, successfully hitting targets from a distance at which the Japanese battleships, with their inferior fire control systems, could not return fire. Yamashiro was finished off by a destroyer's torpedo and sank suddenly at about 4:20 with Admiral Nishimura on board. The southern force was left without command, with only the rear guard surviving due to arriving late and retreating from the engagement entirely. The Japanese northern force was designed as a distraction by the Japanese High Command. Led by Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, it was the last group to be discovered. The trick still worked, as Admiral Halsey shifted his whole focus north after the successful attack in the Sibuyan Sea, believing the group in the north to be the main threat. Due to ambiguous wording of his commands and miscommunication, the entire Third Fleet moved away from the San Bernardino Strait toward the northern force. At dawn on October 25th, Ozawa launched an attack with his few remaining aircraft, most of which were shot down by American air patrols with no damage done to the U.S. ships. In return, the Americans launched their first strike wave of 180 aircraft, still not fully knowing the location and number of ships they would need to face. Around 7 a.m., the Japanese ships were finally detected. At 8 o'clock, the attack went in. The U.S. airstrikes continued until the evening, sinking destroyer Akizuki, light carriers Chitose and Zuiho, and aircraft carrier Zuikaku, the last remaining carrier of those that had participated in the Pearl Harbor attack. In the morning of the 25th, after fighting since 2 a.m. at Surigao Strait, Vice Admiral Thomas Kincaid sent desperate calls for aid. His older, slower battleships had already spent much of their ammunition against the southern force and could not reach the escort carriers that were now threatened by Kurita's central force, which had slipped through the unguarded San Bernardino Strait. Kincaid hoped Halsey's fast battleships and carriers would intervene, but miscommunication and delay left the Third Fleet's action in turning back too late to affect the battle. Kurita's central force emerged, moving along the coast of the Samar Island in the morning of October 25th. In its path lay only the lightly armed Taffy 1, 2, and 3 escort carriers and their thin destroyer screen, a force unprepared and unsuited to face a battleship fleet. Believing Halsey's main force blocked the strait, the Americans never expected the enemy to appear so suddenly. Though battered at Palawan and Sibuyan, Kurita's fleet still boasted battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, a force far more powerful than the escorts before them. Not knowing whether the North Force decoy had worked, and convinced he had stumbled onto Halsey's carriers, Kurita ordered a general attack. The order shattered his formation, sending battleships and cruisers charging ahead without coordination, and turning what could have been a crushing blow into a confused and scattered pursuit. Destroyer USS Johnston was the closest to the enemy. On his own initiative, Ernest E. Evans, captain of the ship, steered her right into the enemy at full speed. She loosed her torpedoes at heavy cruiser Kumano, forcing her out of the line. Johnston's daring attack inspired Admiral Sprague to unleash the rest of the tin cans in a desperate charge against overwhelming odds. The ferocity of the American defense convinced Kurita he had run into Halsey's main fleet. Fearing encirclement, he swung Yamato north to evade torpedoes and regroup, reinforced by reports of carriers approaching from the north. Unaware he was facing only escort carriers, the last shield for the Leyte landings, Kurita abandoned the chance to strike the U.S. invasion fleet. The northern carriers proved out of reach, and after failing to find them, he withdrew through San Bernardino Strait. Halsey arrived too late to cut him off, but Leyte was secured and the battle won. The Battle of Leyte Gulf marked the twilight of Japan's navy and the triumph of American sea power. Despite missteps and confusion, the U.S. Navy secured the landings and crushed Japan's last hope at sea. Above all, it was the courage of the sailors, from below decks to the gun mounts, that sealed victory. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to press the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications not to miss our new videos. And share your thoughts in the comments. We congratulate the U.S. Navy on its 250th anniversary and invite all players to celebrate it in World of Warships Legends with special discounts